Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Not So Common podcast for 2024. Great to be back with you. How are we doing out there? I'm Pat Contry. I'm your guide for the next 60 plus minutes of rambling, incoherent facts, and baseless arguments. No, there'll be a basis for some of my arguments, what I'm going to say. I'll be discussing what's going on in the world of sports, a little bit of politics, and gaming, and what's going on in my life. First off, I hope you're all well out there. We're almost halfway through the year, which is hard to believe. This has been a whirlwind of really the past 4 years have been a whirlwind. And looking back a decade from now, I'll look back at this sort of, pandemic / post-pandemic moment of my life as one where it was trying to just keep afloat and not drowning under the weight of projects, in particular, Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the N64 Library, which is going to go to print any day now as you're listening to this. Or if you're listening to this a week from now, it's probably going to be in print by then. It's going to be being printed up and, glued and stapled together somewhere out in the world before it gets transported back to the mainland here. So that's what's been going on in my life in general the past almost 4 years. But really the past few months, buttoning up a lot of things on the project and a lot of late nights, even the past 2 weeks. I think last night was the first night in about 10 or so days that I went to bed before 2 a.m. because I work better at night, and sometimes that's just the way I operate, and I have to get things done. A lot of last-minute checking, making sure the visuals are lining up, making sure nothing was missed. Like at this point, it's not even quintuple checking. What's the word for 12th checking? What's the word for that? That's what's been going on. But today on the show, I'll be talking about the Caitlin Clark controversy in sports, gambling in sports, and of course, the conviction of the former president, Donald Trump, that happened. It seems like it was weeks ago, but it was only last week. It was only like 4 days ago. I'll be at the SoCal Gaming Expo before all that this weekend. If you're listening, this is going to be the weekend of June 8th and 9th in Pasadena, California. Come out and say hello. I'll be there shaking hands and kissing babies. No, I'm not a politician. I won't be doing that. I'll be there selling Super Nintendo books and pins and what have you. And it's my first convention of the year, and I'll have one at the end of June in Oaks, PA at Too Many Games, which will be like my 9th in a row. If you don't count the pandemic year that was skipped in 2020. So that's what's going on. So first of all, on the docket here for me to discuss is arguably the biggest news story in general, more than Trump being a convicted felon now. This is a sports story about little Caitlin Clark, the basketball phenom who was back-to-back NCAA Women's Player of the Year, got to the finals 2 years in a row, and has been described as, the female Steph Curry. And she is, if you've seen her on TV, phenomenal to watch. Hits the threes from 35 feet like Steph Curry or Dame Lillard does on the men's side. And the ratings for her NCAA games were huge. The ratings for her drafting to the WNBA were in the low millions, which is nuts to think about for the WNBA. And of course, her games have been getting 16, 17, 18, 19,000 people in attendance. Almost all of her games are set to be televised. They're already about 11 games into the season, and the ratings are way up because of her presence. And other players, which we'll get into a little bit, but it's really, she's the one that's doing the heavy lifting at this point. And so what happened in a game over the past weekend, she's on the Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark. They were facing the Chicago Sky. And that's where her college rival Angel Reese was also drafted to. Another player named Kennedy Carter, who's been bounced around on teams, went to Europe to play for a year, I believe, then came back because of various issues. Shoved Caitlin Clark to the ground while waiting for an inbounds pass and called her the B word, while the Chicago Sky, including Angel Reese, celebrated on the sideline. So, of course, this is a major story because you have basically what's being seen as the new, I guess, elevator of this league that's been not languishing, but pretty static in its growth the past, what are we into the WNBA now, 25 years into it, and it hasn't caught on. There hasn't been a lot of really mainstream coverage of the WNBA. They've been putting more marketing into it the past year to try, but it's by and large been a loss leader for the NBA forever, meaning that the NBA was funding it and not really turning a profit on it. You know, ticket sales in person, not great, and television ratings weren't there. Until this year, it looks like it's going to get better. They are looking to renegotiate a new deal with WNBA. I believe their current deal is like $60 million a year for the TV deal. They're looking to go up to 100. So still relatively small, obviously, in comparison to the NBA, but at least it's positive growth. You have people now following the sport at least a little bit, versus by and large, it wasn't really happening in North America. So much so that the women were not getting paid really anything. The average salary, I believe, is still under six figures in the WNBA. And that's one of the reasons why you had someone like Brittany Griner going over to Russia to play in the offseason, because they weren't making enough playing in the WNBA. So you have to go play in Europe, where the leagues, that's a fascinating part of the story to me, is that how much more popular the women's leagues are for certain sports in other parts of the world versus in North America. That's a whole other conversation. But that's what happened. And then, of course, she got incarcerated, which was bullshit. And then she eventually came back here, and we traded her for a weapons dealer back to Russia in that trade. So that said, someone like Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the NBA to be spotlighted, to get more eyes on the product via her, via Cameron Brink, via Angel Reese, and others. So, you know, the dumb expression, a rising tide raises all ships, is actually true to an extent. Because now, even if you just wanted to watch Caitlin Clark, you'll tune into a game, and then you may see players on the other team that you like, that you didn't know about, or even her teammates, even though the Indiana Fever are garbage. That's why they got Caitlin Clark for the number one pick, because they're garbage in the league and probably will be bad for at least this year as well. So, because they had the first, I think, number one pick last year as well. So that's where we're at with things. So you have a lot of fresh eyes on the product that weren't there even 3 or 4 years ago, let alone 10 or 15, that now see the new, you don't want to say face of the league yet, even though she's the one garnering the most attention, because she's still a rookie and she's having growing pains. She has a lot of turnovers, but she's getting guarded like a star. She's getting guarded like Steph Curry does, where, you know, clutching and grabbing and pushing, and don't let her get open on a shot, you know, guard her from 90 feet away, face guarding her, things like that, which is great. That's competition. However, people are now noticing she's been getting, you know, shoved around a lot here and there for a guard. I think she has one of the highest rates of free throws of anyone in the league, even though she's a guard. That shouldn't be happening. Usually players on the inside will get more free throws because they'll be fouled more in general. So they've been noticing that. And then you have this incident that happened that was not a flagrant foul, even though it should have been called a flagrant foul, and then was reassessed a flagrant foul after the game, which usually in the NBA, I guess WNBA, means a fine is assessed. And you get points, enough flagrant fouls and techs, you eventually get suspended and things like that. So that's all fine and dandy. And there's been a lot of discussion, and this has been leading the sports shows. If you're listening to this, not used to hearing about sports, what's fascinating about this is that this has been leading all the major talk shows on Fox Sports and ESPN. Like, this has been number one news, which is fascinating to me, because you would never have, besides like the WNBA finals, where like the championship had just won, like that would almost, WNBA would almost never be a leading story in the past. So I guess it's good and bad that you're getting coverage, but you're not getting coverage about the actual sport and the competition happening in between the lines. You're getting coverage about a flagrant foul that happened, a dirty play, which is everyone has admitted is a dirty play, that happened to Caitlin Clark in the game. And it spawned so much discussion related to players maybe gunning for her, hazing rookies, and if that's acceptable. Has it always happened? You have racial components in there as well that people put their attachments to, because it's white players and black players. You have a lot going on here under the surface that's all now bubbled up. And the league is in such a precarious state with trying to renegotiate a new TV deal. You have the most eyes on the product than ever before, especially at the beginning of a season, that this can go wonky potentially if this continues, and the new fans watching, whether in person or watching through TV, if they get turned off before they get attached long term. So if you have new fans watching, seeing their player that they're tuning into getting thrown around, getting cheap shotted, and this isn't the first time that people have seen it happen to her, but this got the most notoriety because it was a flagrant foul, even though, again, it wasn't called during the game. I'm not sure how it wasn't called during the game, but I'll get to that. And the league, the WNBA, which again is a subsidiary really of the NBA, not being prepared for this, which to me is the most shocking thing. The league knows that Caitlin Clark is going to get a lot of attention, mostly positive, but also negative attention. You have older players that are still in the league that have had really like sideways comments about Caitlin Clark, saying that, I wouldn't draft her first. That was a live telecast. It was Sue Bird with Sue Bird didn't say, but the player that she was with said that, and then saying that it's going to be a rough adjustment period, that's fair, but there has been some sort of weird indirect jabs being taken at Caitlin Clark that have been noticed by lots in the sports world. Charles Barkley went off on it about a week and a half ago on Inside the NBA, saying that like she's getting attacked very weirdly, especially since she's almost not solely responsible, but largely, we'll say 80-90% responsible for the surge in viewership, especially in-game attendance. The games that she's playing are selling at double the rates, sometimes triple of the other games that she's not playing in. So it's undeniable that she's been having this effect, and not that the WNBA players should be bowing down to her and constantly, praising her. Oh, thank you, Caitlin. But taking these weird, not even thinly veiled shots at her makes the players look petty, and it makes it look like there's jealousy involved. And that's what the conversation has been. And you can discuss that. You can say whether or not that's right or wrong. Either way, it's a turnoff, I think, to some people that are just tuning in. And now you're seeing it through, and I'm not saying she's the only person that gets fouled like this, but it was a very, very bad look for the league, a very bad look for the Chicago Sky, who I believe had to come out and have a statement afterwards. And the WNBA has to really safeguard these precious few weeks. Because remember, the WNBA season is only like 40 games. It's not like a long season. Let me just make sure I have that right. Let's see. It's 40 games. So, and it's extended this year because of the Olympics. So I think that they pause it for a few weeks, then come back. You do not have a lot of time to sort of have this traction and capitalize it. You have 40 games. It's half the season of the NBA season. So anything can derail it. Anything weird can happen that could just, before this sort of fire gets even bigger and gets more viewers into it for long-term growth, it can be snuffed out by any wrong move, anything weird that happens. I've heard people describe Caitlin Clark as the golden goose, and that's the closest thing, too, that I can remember where a singular player has come along to elevate an entire league from obscurity or relative obscurity, where you have a chance for the league to turn a really good profit where it was struggling before. I can't think of it. I was not alive, or I was alive, barely, but when Magic and Bird helped reinvigorate a dying NBA in the 80s, this is the closest thing I can remember where the NBA struggled throughout the 70s to garner viewership. Even the NBA finals were not on TV live. They were tape delayed game, unless you were like in a major market, I believe. It was hard to see the games on TV. Then Magic and Bird, which coincidentally also were rivals in college, like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark were. And coincidentally or not, you have one black player, one white player, which does sort of kick up the competitive, we'll just say, let's put it this way. When it's a white player and a black player, you have more eyes on that for all the good and bad reasons. Socially, culturally, that's just how, unfortunately, people are. Where they're going to glom onto the player they want to glom onto, one versus the other, to create that rivalry. And that's what happened with Magic and Bird, and that's what's happening to a different degree, not to the same degree, with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark right now. It makes it easier for people to pick sides, I'll just say that. That's what happens, unfortunately. So, with that all said, the WNBA is at a tipping point. And it's in their best interest that viewers don't get turned off. And that doesn't mean that players shouldn't play hard against Caitlin Clark, that they shouldn't be physical within the rules of the game. However, to see her get knocked around, if it's going to continue to happen, that's going to threaten this potential long tail of success that Caitlin Clark is helping to develop. And now, of course, some players are going to be jealous of Caitlin Clark because, like, what the hell has she done professionally? Absolutely nothing, but she already has a Nike sneaker deal for like $28 million. She has all these endorsements going on, but like Caitlin Clark can't help that. That's not a dig on the other players who didn't get that, but it is what it is. Here's where we're at. And eventually new TV deal, more money means everyone gets paid more money, every player. It means the minimum salaries go up. It means the salary caps go up for the teams. Everyone will benefit long-term if Caitlin Clark is successful. That said, the WNBA has to make sure that this doesn't continue. God forbid she gets hip checked again, pushed from behind, and she injures herself. She tears her ACL. She breaks a bone, out for the season. You imagine the catastrophic effect that would have on the WNBA at this moment in time. And I'm surprised that no one from First Take to First Things First on Fox Sports to Pardon the Interruption, no one has brought up the fact that this is sort of the danger you are playing with when this behavior is not allowed to happen. It's going to happen, but if you don't come down against this sort of behavior long term, this is what can happen. This has to happen quickly in terms of the league telling the teams, hey, listen, play hard all you want, but if this happens again, there's going to be drastic consequences. If someone tosses Caitlin Clark to the floor and it's not a basketball play, if someone headhunts her or tries to deliberately target her, there's going to be massive consequences. There's going to be suspensions. There's going to be we're going to penalize the organization financially. That this has to happen. You have to stop this before it happens. Because I'm rooting for the WNBA. Someone who's never really watched a WNBA game, I'll tune in here and there just out of curiosity now, as I watched a few of the NCAA games this past year. Never really did that before. And now it's like, I'll see what's up. Why not? This is their opportunity. This is their chance. And all it takes is one dirty play to dash the interest and to turn off the millions of new eyes you have on the product. I cannot emphasize that enough. All it takes is one cheap shot, and she breaks an ankle, tears an ACL, something weird. She gets a fucking head wound, and she's bleeding all over the court. We're talking like really bad scenarios that can happen if a cheap shot is taken against her again. That's why you have to suspend players. That's why this is why you have financial penalties to prevent these things from happening. And I'm shocked that the WNBA was not prepared for this to happen from some. All it takes is one or two resentful players, players that have something to prove, want to make a name for themselves via Caitlin Clark, because now Kennedy Carter is a household name in sports, and no one by and large knew who she was before. But because she shoved Caitlin Clark to the ground, now she has some spotlight on her that wasn't there before. All it takes, again, one bad actor, and future prosperity is endangered. So there you go. Enjoy the games and play hard but clean, and everyone have fun out there. Speaking of sports, and this has been on my mind for a while here, gambling in sports. If you told me even 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that we get to the point where legalized gambling companies would be sponsoring Major League Baseball, like FanDuel, and sponsoring the NFL, and sponsoring like their pre and post game show, and all the money coming in. By the way, I'm for legalized gambling before I get into that. I don't want people to think that I'm sort of some school marm that's not for legalized gambling. I am. But if you had told me the marriage between the sports leagues and these gambling organizations would be this intertwined, I would have told you were crazy. And now we are at the point where ESPN, a sports news network, launched their own betting app last year. So now they're in the business. Now they have daily shows about sports gambling, what lines you should bet, what's good money and not. By the way, overall, there is no good money in betting. Just keeping that in mind, because there are always more losers than winners when it comes to the money coming in. Historically, that's why these organizations exist, because they turn a profit. They know how to make money the same way casinos will almost, it's hard to bankrupt a casino. We'll just say that. If you know what you're doing, casinos should be raking in the money. That's because they know the odds. They know what wins money. They know how the money flows in and out based upon what the bets are, et cetera, et cetera. So that said, we are at the point now where we are starting to see the the hens come home to roost. I was going to say the roosters come home to roost, which can make sense as well. Chickens are coming home to roost. And maybe some roosters. We are at the point now where it's a lot easier for the players to gamble on sports. Not that players weren't illegally gambling before, and famously an NBA ref, after a federal investigation was found to be involved in a gambling ring. Was that 15 years ago at this point? Seems like it was forever ago. But now you have players that can gamble on their phones hanging out. That to me is problematic, and they're allowed to. The only real rule against players not gambling is gambling within their own sport. So football players not gambling on football, baseball players not gambling on baseball, et cetera, et cetera. That to me is their line where, well, at least that's reasonable, and if people have the itch, then then it won't happen. That said, we've had some major stories happen this year. We've had like 3 or 4 just this year, not counting past years. What was the NFL player that was suspended for gambling last year? Let me look that up while I ramble here. You think I have a prepared podcast? I do most of the time. 5 players were suspended in 2023 for violating the NFL's gambling policy. 5 from last year that they know about, because obviously they work in conjunction with the gambling companies and the apps to tell them, like, okay, here's a list of players. Let us know if any of these players are betting on stuff where they're not supposed to. That's how this works. And obviously for illegal gambling, you have no idea, because that's why it's illegal, because there's no, it's illegal. It's underground. They're not going to be working with real businesses. So first off, Shohei Ohtani, who's now, the biggest face of Major League Baseball, and some is arguing already the greatest player of all time. I won't get into that. It's hard to compare eras. But yeah, he's amazing. The modern Babe Ruth. He can hit for power and he can pitch. So this hasn't happened literally since Babe Ruth. This sort of player. That's literally 100 years. So he was caught up in an investigation where huge amounts of money were being paid to a California illegal betting ring that turned out the payments were being made by his interpreter earlier this year. That's what the feds concluded, that Shohei Ohtani was not the one responsible for the payments. That's the story that we have. Imagine if it wasn't, though. Imagine if it was Shohei Ohtani involved, who had just signed, a contract for several $100 million. And is the face of the league in the prime of his career. Imagine if we were this close. There was a few days of time a couple months ago where it was like, is Ohtani being covered for by his interpreter? Like, how did the interpreter get the access to Ohtani's bank accounts? Like, what is happening? This could have went really sideways really quickly. I mean, this would the shockwaves, if Shohei Ohtani was one outed for this illegal gambling, would have been immense in the sports world. We were a whisper hair away from that happening here. And now it's like, well, that's fine. Everything's fine now. We'll just ignore that gambling has been now officially entrenched. And I know this was an illegal gambling ring that Ohtani's interpreter / friend was involved in. But overall, the spotlight on gambling is the biggest it's ever been with sports. And the encouragement. There's commercials constantly. They have segments in every sport now telling you the lines and what you should bet. What parlay should you bet? There's the Charles Barkley's parlay on Inside the NBA. The money's everywhere to encourage you to get into gambling. Hell, I'd be gambling on sports if it wasn't illegal in California. I'm pissed it's not. I'd like to throw in a bet every now and then. Why not? Entertainment. I won't blow the funds that would go towards, I don't know, a rare NES game. Maybe I would. Maybe it would have prevented me from some wacky purchases I made the past 25 years. That said, we were really close to Armageddon there with baseball, especially since baseball has been trying to make a comeback the past couple of years with rules changes, trying to get younger eyes in the sport, and it's been working here and there. We're quickening the games. The games are like a half hour shorter now than what they were a couple of years ago. These are all positive things. But all it takes is one really, really, really bad thing to happen, just like Caitlin Clark potentially getting injured, with someone like Shohei Ohtani, if he had been implicated as part of this investigation negatively. But it was a rough week for Major League Baseball, wondering what the hell is happening there. So that happened, and then we forget, right? Oh, whatever, fine. And then a player just been banned for life. This was announced this morning. This isn't why I'm talking about this. I wanted to talk about gambling now being so entrenched in sports. This happened earlier today. Padres Tucupita Marcano gets lifetime ban for baseball bets and others punished. This is from CBS Sports. The writers Matt Snyder and RJ Anderson. San Diego Padres infielder Tucupita Marcano has been permanently banned from Major League Baseball after violating the league's gambling policy. It was accompanied by 1-year suspensions for 4 other players. Another Padres player, Jay Groom, someone on the Athletics, someone on the Phillies, and someone on the Diamondbacks. MLB received data from a legal sports betting operator concerning baseball gambling activity from accounts that belong to the above players. First of all, if you're a player, I'm sure you're warned, both by the league and by the Players Association, don't fucking bet on your own sport because the information will get back because there's an agreement between these sports books, betting books, and the leagues. Like, it's insane to me that they think they'd get away with this. So there you go. They tell the league then suspends and or bans him. That's what's been happening. I'm curious to know why the other players were not permanently banned. That's what I want to know. And I believe it's because likely the ban for life is likely because he bet for or against his own team. That's what I'm guessing. Because that's what happened. Well, Pete Rose didn't always say I never bet on. What did Rose say? Rose said he never bet within his own team when he was managing the Reds, but he did bet on baseball. My guess is that these other four folks bet on baseball that were suspended for 1 year, but didn't bet within games from their own team. So that saved them from the permanent ban. I'm guessing with the Marcano, I'm guessing he bet on Padres games. That's what happened here. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Why they would come down harder on that player. And then the Pirates had to put out a statement saying we're disappointed, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, lifetime ban for you. And this person was not that old, only 24, had their whole career still ahead of them. The investigation said that they gambled $150,000 across nearly 400 baseball bets. And then he bet on his own team, the Pirates. Well, there it is. That's the lifetime ban. If he hadn't bet on, it wouldn't happen. So it was on the Pirates. He bet on the Pirates. That's a lifetime ban. The other funny part of the story, MLB estimates that he won just 4.3% of his MLB-related gambles. Well, better baseball player than a gambler. That's probably, unless there was a lot of weird parlays. If you don't know what a parlay is, it's a like multi-threaded bet where you have to win more than one thing for the cash for the payout to come through. So it's a multiplier. So if you only bet on two things, you get say 10x. But then if you bet on five things, it's like 1 in 1,000. So obviously the risk and reward multiplies based upon the number of bets you add. But either way, 4% is really bad. You're not making any money on that. Holy shit, that's 1 out of 25 bets. Marcano, what's happening? Yep, other players didn't bet on their own games, so that saved them. At least they were still dumb enough to bet on baseball. You're out a year's salary, which is not a small amount of money. Minimum salary, even in MLB, is not a small chunk of change compared to other leagues. You're making money here. You're making hundreds of thousands of dollars to play baseball, for God's sake. You sit around all day playing baseball. If you're a relief pitcher, you may pitch once a week, maybe twice a week. That's some easy money. Sitting around, relaxing in the dugout, chewing some big league chew. You got some sunflower seeds going, spitting them all around. You got an easy life. Don't ruin it by getting suspended from baseball. Get that game check. But football, baseball are not the only major sports where this is now a problem. Someone has been banned from the NBA. Jonte Porter was banned from the NBA. I don't remember something like this happening ever in the NBA outside of the referee from 15 years ago that was banned and ended up in prison. This would have been a huge story, obviously, if this player was more well known. Jonte Porter, the brother of Michael Porter Jr., who was the third option on the Denver Nuggets, who won the championship last year, and this year we're out in the second round. Was found to be betting on NBA games. And again, you might have gotten away with it if you weren't betting on NBA games, but then bet on a game he was involved in on a prop bet on himself. And that's how he got caught. This is what happened. Prop bets involving Porter from games on January 26th and March 20th, multiple sources told ESPN. In the game on January 26th against the LA Clippers, there was increased betting interest on the under for Porter props, which for the night were set at 5.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. There was also an over-under for Porter's made three-pointers, which was 0.5, meaning if you bet the under on 0.5, it means he made no threes, you win the under, 0. That evening, Porter played just 4 minutes before leaving the game because what the Raptors said was an aggravation of an eye injury he had suffered 4 days earlier against the Grizzlies. Porter did not score against the Clippers, but had 3 rebounds and 1 assist, and he did not attempt a three, meaning the under hit on all of the props. So that means if you bet the props and you parlayed the props, you could have made, it could have been like, 40 to 1. You could have made, I don't know the math on it, but this is what you're talking about potentially here. So, and obviously if you're the player doing it, you can make some money, especially if it's the under and you fake an injury to pull yourself from the game before you hit any of the props and you're keeping proper count in your head of how many rebounds and assists and points you have. The next day, as part of a daily report to users on betting results, DraftKings Sportsbook stated that the under on Porter's three-pointers was the biggest money winner for bettors on any NBA player props from games that evening. So DraftKings, they see all these bets come in. And it's like, over and under on, Nikola Jokic's assists or Luka Doncic, whether or not he's going to hit a triple-double. And then they get this weird bet for like a bench player, which obviously set off alarm bells from that point. And then there was a similar incident that happened March 20th against the Sacramento Kings. Then they did an investigation, and they found that there was some weird like private Discord group going on with bettors talking to Jonte Porter. That's what I was reading. And so I guess what it comes back to is people not thinking somehow they're not going to get caught, especially when, again, the sports books are communicating with the league and informing them of this weird shit. And again, the players know this is happening. It's not like the players are told what they can and cannot do and what will happen to them by the league and their team, and the players union knows this stuff is happening. So it just boggles my mind you would throw away a fruitful NBA career, because even a bench player in the NBA can make millions of dollars a year. Millions. If you're a bench player in the NBA for 10, 12 years, you're making, $60 million potentially more. So this is generational wealth from being a bench player, and you piss it all away for prop bets. It's so bizarre. And while we're talking about the Porter brothers, one of the four here, 2 in the NBA, 2 not. My heart goes out to Michael Porter Jr., not just because he was eliminated in the second round on the Nuggets by the Timberwolves, but because his brothers are seemingly all fuck-ups. One just banned from the NBA, one just got arrested for a DWI, and one went to prison for killing someone. Not intentionally. Let's see, what was the other one that happened? Legal troubles for all 3 of Michael Porter Jr.'s brothers here. Let's see what happened here. Collided with Uber driver Katharina Rothman along with her passenger. Unfortunately, the accident was fatal and Rothman was killed, with her passenger seriously injured in the incident. Wow. Okay. So that was Coban Porter, was sentenced to 6 years in prison for killing someone in a traffic accident. Holy shit. Then the other brother, banned for life for gambling. And the other one, just arrested for a DWI. Wow, okay, that's a lot for Michael Porter Jr. to deal with. That's a lot. So that's I guess it's either, if you're Michael Porter Jr., you're not hoping he did anything bad, but it's not a good track record with the other 3 brothers at this point. Oh my God, that's rough. Try not to make light of someone dying and gambling, illegal gambling on your own sport, but geez, that's tough if you're Michael Porter Jr. Which, by the way, I think he has a podcast as well. So I'm not sure we'll be discussing this the same way I am. But, give him a listen. Maybe it's a decent podcast. I have no idea. A lot of NBA players are getting into podcasts. Some are great. Some are not good, from the ones I've listened to here and there. Paul George's is one of the really good ones, by the way. Paul George's podcast. I won't say it in the bad ones. I don't want to get ethered by them on their podcast, even though they're not going to know who the hell I am or ever hear that I'm slandering them. But there are really good players podcasts and really bad players podcasts. And then that's it for gambling on sports. It's just it's going to get worse, and every year you're going to hear more and more about it. With every sport, I will say every major sport. Maybe not hockey as much. For some reason, I don't think that was going to be as effective as much. I think every major sport, probably because there's more money involved in the other three than hockey, you're going to hear about more and more gambling suspensions every year from players not doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Guys, this is a public service announcement. Think you've mastered the look in sweatpants and joggers? You're one step away from pajamas in public. You may look sloppy to others, including your significant other. It's time to look better in jeans. If you take anything away from the show today, it's that the perfect jean isn't just another pair of stiff, uncomfortable, nut-crushing pants. They've cracked the code to solving all your denim difficulties. The perfect jean makes great looking, perfect fitting jeans that are as comfortable as sweatpants and more stretchy than a kangaroo's pouch. It's made from a special denim fabric that's super soft, just like sweatpants or joggers, but doesn't make you look like a slob. And the best part? They make 6 fits, from skinny to thick, waist sizes from 26 to 50, and lengths from 26 to 38. So whether you're a thick daddy, short king, or anything in between, they perfectly fit your body and accentuate your assets. Pun intended. These are truly perfect jeans. Once you try them, you'll never go back. You can get 15% off your first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use code CONTRY15, CONTRI15 for 15% off. I've been wearing the perfect jeans now for a few months, and they are comfortable. You can wear them to the club or a night in the town with a date or just going to the supermarket. They are comfortable and they look great, and they have all different colors. They have a nice dark gray that I like, all different shades of blue, and they're stretchy and comfortable, and they don't feel as constricting as normal jeans. It's finally time to stop crushing your balls in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectjean.nyc. My listeners out there, get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code CONTRY15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code CONTRY15. After you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support the Not So Common podcast and tell them I sent you. F your khakis and get the perfect jean. So the former president got convicted of 34 felonies. This was in a New York court. It was a state crime, which means that it can't be pardoned. Could be overturned in an appeal, which I'll get to, or I guess the Supreme Court, if it ever got up that high. So Trump was convicted for falsifying business records in relation to Stormy Daniels, good old Stormy, the porn star. This is a hush money payoff that happened like right weeks before the 2016 election to make sure that she didn't come out and say, hey, I banged a guy who might be president. They didn't want that to happen, allegedly. So, they paid her off for the alleged sex that happened like 2006. You can actually, I think, Google a picture of them two standing together at the event where they met at like a golf course or whatever. So that said, we have a convicted felon running for president on one of the two major tickets and has a legitimate shot of being elected as president again. If that happens, it would be only the second time in our nation's history where you had 2 terms from a president non-consecutively. And don't let me look up who the other one is because I really don't want to right now. But I know that happened once. I know the general history of the United States. So, okay. I'm not going to talk about whether or not you agree he should have been prosecuted, whether or not you think it was fixed or not. I'll just say this about that real quick, though. If you think this was fixed, which in my opinion, it was not fixed, before all the MAGAs out there jump at me, I don't think it was fixed. It was a jury of their own peers. You had to impanel a grand jury, and then you have a full trial, and everyone gets access to the same exact evidence, the defense and the prosecution, access to the same witnesses, what have you. And Trump could have he could have been a witness for himself if he wanted to. He did not want to because obviously he would have been a disaster on the stand. That said, even if you think this was not a good trial for whatever reason. That's why we have a really robust appeals process in this country, and we have layers of appeals that can happen, and it benefits the rich, which Trump is. So he'll be able to hire to get this appealed as many times as he wants to see whether or not this should have been overturned. That said, we'll toss that aside whether or not you think it was just or not. That's not the conversation I'm going to get into. That's not what's interesting to me. What's interesting to me is the effect this could have on the election in the fall. That's what's interesting to me. And my gut at the time I heard this was like, well, if you are dead set on voting for Trump anyway, you are going to vote for him. And you might try to get more people to vote for him, but if you're a diehard Trump fan, by this point you're diehard. It doesn't matter. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue like he said and not be convicted of it. You still vote for him. That's fine. If you're against Trump vehemently, this it won't affect your vote either, because you'll still vote for Biden. Like, you'll still not vote for Trump. So it doesn't change any math there. So who does it change the math to? Who can this affect? To me, it would affect any holdouts, independents who are leaning Trump. That's who it affects. Or those, well, I don't like either, but I'll still vote Republican. If there's any of those left, there might be some. But I think you're looking at 5% of the population at this point that this could affect in terms of nudging them away from Trump. Either meaning they either vote for Biden, or more likely they just don't vote for Trump, which is still a vote for Biden in essence. It's still a vote by sitting home and not voting for Trump if you're going to vote for him. That's who I think this affects. I think it affects people that were really biting their tongue and voting for Trump still. I mean, almost bitten through their tongue entirely. And this is the last, even though there's a lot of last straws before this, this could be still the last straw for people. And I'm talking those people that would just sit home or still tell their friends, oh yeah, their other Republican or GOP or MAGA friends, yeah, I'm voting for Trump. And then they just end up not feeling the need to vote for Trump. That's what I'm talking about here. You're not going to have Democrats switch to vote Republican. You might have a very small amount of Republicans switch to Democrat, or more probable, they just stay home. And that's like 2 to 5%, we'll just say, whatever that is, of the population. Maybe it's only 2%. That's enough to swing a close election. As my Windows sound goes off for updates, for weather updates. Shut up, Windows. I was in the middle of an important topic here. That's who I think this affects. And before I get to the article backing me up, I did not read this article first, but I did search for evidence to back up my thoughts about this the past few days after this ruling came in. This is from ABC News. Trump's conviction may be hurting him, but it's early. Post-verdict polling shows a slight shift towards Biden. And we all know polling is tough to read. It was off by like 4 points in the 2016 election, where people thought, well, it's definitely going to be Hillary, but like the polling was not great in some states and swing states, and so Trump ends up winning. Even though, again, polling it's an inaccurate art and science. You're never going to have it precise. You try to do the best you can. And I will argue it's going to get tougher and tougher because there's less and less landlines going forward. And then I think the younger generation will not want to be polled more and more. So I think you're going to get less accurate polling going forward. And I think I said this 4 years ago. I might have said it 8 years ago on the Not So Common podcast back then. Now, it's going to be tougher for good pollsters to get accurate results. All right, so this is from, who wrote this article here? Nathaniel Rakich. 4 pollsters have already conducted national polls of the election since Trump was found guilty, and a handful more have asked about the verdict, but not the election explicitly. They show that Americans are taking the verdict seriously, and it may be giving President Joe Biden a small boost in support. However, it's still too early to draw any definitive conclusions. However, the verdict also doesn't seem to have changed many people's minds about the case. For example, 51% of adults told ABC News / Ipsos that Trump intentionally did something illegal with regard to the case, virtually the same as the 53% who said so in the poll just after Trump's indictment, which was last year. A YouGov CBS News poll found that 9 in 10 Americans who thought Trump was guilty before the verdict agreed with the verdict, while 9 in 10 Americans who thought Trump wasn't guilty disagreed with it. So again, you're not really changing. Your minds were made up before the trial, and it's not like people that one way or the other are going to rethrow the testimony. I guess some will, but likely not, especially if you think Trump's being railroaded. You're not going to read about any testimony or evidence or things like that. It doesn't matter in your world, likely. That said, 2 other polls found that the verdict has made a small but significant share of potential Trump supporters less likely to vote for him. According to Ipsos / Reuters, 10% of Republican registered voters said they were less likely to support Trump after the conviction. For a Forbes poll put that number at 11%. Similarly, this is what I'm talking about here. 25% of independents said they were less likely to vote for Trump, and 28% of independents said so in the Harris X / Forbes poll. There it is. Independents, a very small fringe of Republican voters that were like slightly leaning Trump before, and independent voters. That's who this affects here. That's who this could. It was going to be a close election before. I'm not even saying who's going to win, but it was going to be close no matter what. Now this gives the Biden campaign a little bit of a buffer potentially here. I think you're going to have probably people just sit home versus vote for Biden, which again, that benefits Biden either way. If you either vote for Biden or don't vote for Trump, it's the same vote in essence here. Yeah, there was a swing on these. Look at these polls before. One poll had Republican +2. Now it's that stayed the same. However, an even poll went Democrat +2. +2 Republican went +1. So that's a -1. And then another even poll went Democrat +2. So you had stayed the same, +2 Democrat, +1 Democrat, +2 Democrat, which is an average pat math, according to this, of that's like a +1 difference between these 4 polls in favor of the Democratic ticket there. So there you go. We'll see this play out probably more and more. Now, you might ask yourself, this is another fascinating thing about this case, about the potential of Trump going to prison. Technically, he can go to prison with these felonies. However, I think the odds are low for a couple of different reasons. I think it would be super fucking weird to send an ex-president to jail unless it was like some violent crime where it was like, all right, well, he murdered 5 people. We have now a serial killer ex-president, we'll just say, in theory. Like, what if, I don't know, Jimmy Carter ended up choking people to death with peanuts. And that's how he got off in the 80s. I don't know. Yeah, you'd have to send someone to like an institution where they're locked up. We get that. This is a financial crime, and you're talking about business fraud and stuff like that. I think the judge would probably sentence them. Plus, doesn't want to like foment like civil war, potentially. I think you're more likely to some form of like house arrest / like strong probation. I think that's what would probably happen here. I don't think it's going to be a slap on the wrist. I don't think it's going to be like hard, like, 10 years in prison, especially since, how does the Secret Service protect the president in prison? Are the Secret Service the president's cellmates so he doesn't get shivved? So he doesn't get shivved in the yard? So someone doesn't like steal his pudding at lunch? Like, how would the Secret Service, how would they handle that? I don't know. That'd be a funny thing to watch, but I don't know how they would handle a president being in prison, an ex-president. So that's another reason why. But I think you're going to be looking at some form of house arrest. And whether or not that gets appealed, whether or not that affects, how people think about him for voting in the fall, even worse or better. I'm just saying that's how I personally feel logically this is going to go. And that's whether or not you agree with him being convicted or not. That's how I think it plays out here. I'm just trying to be like objective when it comes to like what's the most reasonable outcome to this. I'm not even going to get into the other things hanging over Trump's head, like the Jack Smith independent counsel investigation or the Georgia investigation, him trying to bribe and trying to pressure the Secretary of State to find, in quotes, find me votes so that Georgia would have went for Trump. Like that stuff is still happening. That stuff's still getting looked into, and we don't even know where that's going to end up. So there's other stuff that's going to happen with Trump legally at some point. Obviously, that stuff can be delayed if he's elected president, but we're in uncharted territory here with a convicted felon running for office that has a chance. I mean, yeah, you can be a convicted felon. Maybe I don't know you stole a car in Idaho somewhere, and now you're running for president. I mean, yeah, sure, but like you don't have a chance. This is unprecedented. Here. Like, I don't know what happens if Trump gets elected and he has to, serve house arrest. Like, how does that work? Is he going to be a Zoom president? Is he going to Zoom in from Mar-a-Lago? No, he has to be from Trump Tower because it's New York. He's going to be zooming in from Trump Tower with his cabinet. I don't know. It'd be a funny movie. That's all I know. All right. Can't wait to see the comments about this. I'm sure they'll be calm and very reasonable, especially on YouTube, where everyone's super, always even keeled with their comments and never go off the deep end. All right, I got some Q&A time here. First from Twitter. This is from @Niebieski. Oh, sorry, Twitter/X. If we want to indulge in awful rebranding. What's your take on pirate games? I'm from Argentina, and in the Nintendo/Super NES era, we only got access to Chinese copies of the Famicom. And to me, collecting retro means collecting the games I played, and those were pirated copies. That's fine. I mean, in the U.S., pirated games were stuff you'd only see at like rental shops sometimes, or at weird flea markets. Or I remember in the mid 2000s when you finally started seeing the Famiclones with 250 NES games on the plug and play basically. To me, pirate games are always on the fringe. But yeah, if you live in another country, to you that might be normal. So no, I don't have anything against that. If that's collect what you collect, that's fine. I don't think you're hurting anyone, collecting pirated games that are 30, 40 years old. You're not really hurting anyone there. At G.A. Ashley, Garrett Ashley. What are the writing plans now? Anything on the table that you've been putting off due to the N64 guidebook? Oof. I've been, I can't say too much. I will redo the NES book, which is not a new project from scratch, but it will require some work. We're talking that'll require 10% the amount of work of doing a new book from scratch. So it's not as daunting, but I want to redo the format. I want to have some reviews revised, and I want to get maybe new artwork done. So, like if you bought the third print run, maybe you're okay. But if you bought the first print run, well, this one will be radically different. And maybe you want to, buy the new one almost 10 years later. It's up to you. But that's what I'm thinking about. And that'll better match the quality, I believe, of the Super Nintendo book and the N64 book. Not that the original NES book was garbage, but you learn a lot in over 10 years of doing these books. You learn a lot. You learn what, plus I've improved as an editor and I've improved as a writer, and I can spot things easier 10 years later. And then, yeah, maybe I'll write some fiction too. That's all I'll say about that. And then, and new NES Punk videos, that counts as fiction. At Bodymore420, Nick, what do you find yourself gravitating to game-wise at your current age? Do you still game often? I game a lot more on mobile because that's what's like convenient to me when I'm like watching TV, and I'll some Star Trek Fleet Command. They sponsored me on Twitch like 3 months ago, and now I play it almost every day, and it's fun. I'm in an alliance. Woo! So that's fun. I'm trying to build up my Klingon interceptor right now, my D3 class. Trying to build it up. And then I play chess on my iPad. I've been getting better at chess. We're going to be playing that. And then I'll get back to, I'll put it this way. Once the books are done, including the next book, I'll be more apt to go play retro games again for fun, if not playing them a lot for work, if that makes sense. That includes doing the videos as well. What's your other top hobby that has nothing to do with gaming? I guess exercising at this point, but that's like 3 days a week. But that's a hobby. Watching movies and documentaries. That's what's happening with me nowadays. You know, cooking salmon. That's my hobby. At 80s kid, question 1: what was your favorite candy bar / hostess / Little Debbie dessert growing up? I don't know why you did not include Drake's cake, the goat, but Drake's cakes were good too. Devil dogs. The Little Debbie brownies were evil. They were so good and bad for you. But Hostess Chocolate Bliss, if you listen to my streams on Wednesday, twitch.tv/country code, where we watch commercials, once every 3-4 months, we'll see a Chocolate Bliss commercial, and I'll just start salivating all over the screen because those are the best things ever. Those should have been outlawed. They were so good. Like quadruple chocolate. Chocolate Bliss is with fudge and cake and, oh God, cream. Chocolate, great. Then what's the next question? Do you play any current video games? See above. See question above. Listen to question above. At Chief237. Do you think Nintendo should call their next console Switch 2, or should they come up with something more unique? Well, this is what's tricky, because obviously they fucked up with the Wii U because the branding and plus the look was so similar in terms of like the aesthetic of the controller and everything that they screwed up. People thought that was a peripheral for the Wii, not its own console. I think they got to be careful, but the fact that it's a handheld as well, I think it'll be easier to get away with calling it like, I don't want to say like Switch 360 or Super Switch, but I think it'll be easier because it'll be another handheld, if that makes sense. But it would also be backwards compatible. So I think I'll give them a little, I don't know. I think you have to have Switch in there somewhere, or at least Switch adjacent, where you Switch was such a great name because you're switching from playing handheld to TV. You know what I mean? Like that's handheld to like console TV. Like that's a great name. It'd be hard to come up with that. I haven't thought about it, but I'm sure Nintendo could do a good job with that. This is from Rick at Rick Jagielski. Hope I didn't butcher that name. I love to hear about movies that personally resonate with you. Well, that's a big question, but Glory is one of my favorite films because it's about, duty and honor amongst a group of people that have been, literally were enslaved and were, not respected. And then they still felt duty and honor to serve the country and show that they were true men in light of all that, in the face of all that. And that's based on a true story. So I love Glory. The acting's great in it. The action is one of the most realistic depictions of war, especially for Civil War. And yeah, check that one out. Streets of Fire, 40th anniversary just happened. The basis of like Final Fight and Streets of Rage and a lot of like 80s Japanese stuff. I heard like Bubblegum Crisis and anime stuff for the whole aesthetic. That movie's so unique and weird and good. And I'm trying to encourage Ian to watch it. And that one is like, you have to watch that. I think it's free on YouTube to watch. Go watch Streets of Fire. Very young Willem Dafoe in that, and a very young Diane Lane in that. Is there any franchise you regret getting into? From TKRX21. I kind of regret getting into Unreal Tournament, not because it wasn't fun, it was. Just because there's now a shitty legacy, and you're reminded of it constantly. I know that's, I'm beating a dead horse, but that's kind of lame to me. And there's nothing to look forward to for Unreal Tournament. And I kind of regretted, though, in my 20s playing it competitively because it was not a gigantic waste of time. But looking back, I was like, wait, yeah, that was my main hobby for like 2-3 years. When I'm like 22 to like 25, was like playing Unreal Tournament. Even like 26 and even 27. Like 3, 4, 5 years was Unreal Tournament. Especially, I'll say 2004. So from 2004 to like 2008, like for 4 years, like hardcore Unreal Tournament player, I was. And looking back, I was like, yeah, I mean, it was fun, but there was nothing to grow from that. And I did make a friend from my clan that I was in, but I haven't talked to like over 10 years. I should give him a call. From Zanzibar. It's not a gaming related question, but I just wanted to ask, how are you doing? How have you been? You're more than just gaming and just wanted to check in on you. Well, that's very thoughtful, Zanzibar. I'm not just some sort of like, meat sack puppet that just creates entertainment and podcasts, I guess, and books. I'm doing better than I should be. I'll say that. It's been a rough 3 years. It's been rough, this last book. And one day I might tell the full story about why it's bad and what happened and how I had to power through some really bad obstacles, I'll just say, in helping produce this book. Other than that, though, no, I'm doing good. My health is great. My health's the best it's ever been. My hair's getting darker again because of less stress. That's not even a lie. I've been finding over the past year and a half, hair's going from white back to dark on the root. I'm like, well, okay, that is a thing. Stress makes your hair lighter earlier. I'm like, oh, there you go. I am vain when it comes to it, but no, that is a thing. My hair is definitely darker now than what it was 2 years ago. And you can look at the videos from 2 years ago. I am not lying. I had a white streak in the front of my hair 2 years ago that was really noticeable from stress. And now, well, it's got white still, but like, yeah, it was bad. So no, I'm doing good. Thank you so much. I'm hanging in there. I need a vacation and a hiatus, though, at some point. Have you developed an appreciation for a game? This is from at Joe Panaccio. I did not pronounce that correctly, but I've seen Joe comment before. Have you developed an appreciation for a game, or maybe even a new appreciation for a system you didn't otherwise appreciate while working on the guidebooks? Yeah, the N64. I've said that before, that the N64, in some ways, I was the best and worst person to do this book for, because I had no bias positively for the N64. But like, I also had to start from scratch in a lot of ways to learn up about different things and do research and double check things editing. So I did learn a lot about the library and a lot more positive things than I thought. So that was the good of it. That was the good. At Stats Jeff, Pop-Tarts or toaster strudels? Oh, I was a toaster strudel kid. Probably because they were cheaper, because Pop-Tarts had a bigger marketing budget. The toaster strudels were so good. How did I get away with? How did my parents not realize how bad those were for me? Eating dessert for breakfast. Oh, you got your own sugar frosting packet to put on fresh. And even without that, it wasn't healthy. But with that, jeez, God. Oh, they were so good. I don't think I had Pop-Tarts until college. Now that I think about it. I'm trying to remember if we ever had Pop-Tarts at all. It was always toaster strudel. Do I collect movies as well? No, I don't collect movies. I have a box of my DVDs that I had, from like the late 90s to, early 2010s, you should say, but I haven't bought a new DVD in forever. I don't watch them. I'm lazy. I really need to get a Blu-ray player, though, just to have a Blu-ray player. I have a DVD player hooked up, but, a Blu-ray player can play both. I should just replace it with a Blu-ray. This is from Blue Frosty 86. Non-gaming question. What do you think of the idea of universal basic income? Do you think it's something achievable in America? Yeah, I actually talked about this on a Not So Common podcast 4 years ago. I might have also talked about it on the CU podcast, that I think it's viable if you do it correctly. And we kind of tinker with it slightly out of necessity during the early part of the pandemic with the stimuluses and giving people extra income to help them stay afloat. And to, we extended some unemployment benefits. So like we giving everyone a check for what, $700, which some people qualified for. I don't think I did, which means I was in a better spot where, I should be thankful. I think doing that, there's an argument to be made that if you give people enough money for necessities, they will be less desperate, to find other means of making money, which are not beneficial to society, meaning less crime. I'm not saying it would eliminate crime entirely, whenever, but if people are struggling less in general, I'm just talking about food and, clothing and roof over your head. You take care of most of the bare necessities, everyone's in general happier. You still have to work to get everything you want, including luxury items, but the pressure is taken off just enough where I think you would see a drop in smaller, like petty crimes. You would see, I think, less theft. You would see, because you have people that are struggling less in general. And I think you could do that. And I do not think, inflation is bullshit. From the past even few months, McDonald's has doubled their prices over 10 years, way more than quote unquote natural inflation. Target's now lowering prices on thousands of items because they've been gouging. These corporations have been gouging. I think more and more people have to realize and know that when you see quote unquote inflation, a lot of it is not done out of necessity for companies to keep afloat. A lot of it happens just because these corporations can do it and get away with it because they see an opportunity. And that's what's happened the past 4 years. Like egg prices was not due to inflation naturally. It's because there was a bird flu that killed almost the entire chicken population, and it took years to get that back to normal. So that's actually retracted. But so that's where like there was some meaning to that price being raised. But I brought up my peanut butter almost doubling in price over the past 3 years. At some point, you can't tell me this is all because of their prices on their end going up. It's not true, especially since like shipping prices from Asia have somewhat normalized. They've come down dramatically. For example, on stuff, I know that because I'm now shipping stuff from China, so I know how those prices ebb and flow and how bad they were 3 years ago versus now. So what I'm saying is this giving people a universal basic income would be like a hedge against unnatural inflation, and plus wages not rising to match. And plus, in general, I think it would put more people at ease in general, and more people at ease means a better society. It means less crime. I don't know. I think you can get away with it and you would not trigger some sort of weird hyperinflation, because again, if you give people enough money, I'm not talking about like buy everyone enough money to buy, a brand new car every year. Like that's no, I mean enough that you wouldn't have to worry less about the essentials. I think we can do it. That's it. And I've said this before in the same speech. At Johan 3088, you don't have to name names, but is there any old YouTube friend you've made content with before and were friends with, but wouldn't associate with these days, at least online? Oh yeah, there's several. I mean, yeah, there's absolutely several. I spoke about a couple before in the podcast. I believe, maybe, yes, yeah. There are ones. I'll put it this way: there are ones I've spoken about and ones I have not. And it does not mean I won't speak about those ones eventually, because I probably will at some point. Just not the time is not right. At Bobo Breeze, have you ever thought about making your own Path the NES Punk video game on NES? No, I have not, but I've been approached at least twice in the past where people saying, hey, we have an idea, we want to do a game with you. It's like a Path the NES Punk game. And I said to myself, I don't like the idea of doing that, because not that it's a cash in, but I don't think it'd be interesting. I don't think would feel weird. I'm not as big as like an AVGN video game where he has 100 times the audience I do, where it would make sense to do that on top of that. And plus, I don't want to brand myself that closely to something like that. Like if I was going to do an NES game, I'd like it to be a little more clever than like a Path the NES Punk action platformer. That's just me. That's what I would want to do. I'm not saying I wouldn't do a game like that in the future, but for now, at least, I wouldn't be focusing on that. This is from Facebook. Macho Libre. Aside from eating pizza and Italian pastries, what are your favorite things to do while in New York for Long Island Retro Expo? Which, by the way, is in August. Come out and see me in August. Last year, I was the guy who brought you donuts from Glen Wayne Bakery. Thank you for pastries. The more pastries, the better while I'm there. I don't need a dozen donuts, though. That's a lot to eat in over a week and a few days. But, I'm not ever going to turn away pastries. I don't want to say problem. When I'm in town for Long Island, I don't have a lot of free time, unfortunately. I get there like Thursday night. It's now a 3-day convention. I don't have a lot of time to go out and see things. Go to like White Castle with my friend Antoinette. We'll do that one night. I'll get real pizza one night. Maybe I'll do something like that. But when I'm back for Pennsylvania, and I go to too many games in Pennsylvania, I spend an extra few days going to Jersey, and I'll go to like Seaside Heights Boardwalk. That's like my favorite thing to do. Or I'll go back to an old neighborhood in New Jersey where either I grew up or my cousins are. That's what I like to do. That's the sort of things that I enjoy doing. Jabberjaw says, isn't it weird that he's anti-seal? Like, why can't he just leave it alone? Why has he got to be against it? That was what the sealed game seller, I believe his name was D-Rob, said against me in a video with Carl Jobst a couple years ago. That phrase. That's funny. A few more here, and I'm getting out, and I got to get dinner. Joseph says, will you ever do another video featuring Julia Fair? Asking for a friend that is a scientist, no. I hope Julia's doing well. She was lovely to work with. What was that already? Like 12 years ago? Oh my God. Kevin asked, do you feel video game reviewers influence the general mindset of gamers when it comes to classic games? For example, I know people who hate Zelda 2 but liked it a long time ago. See, that's weird because I never met someone that changed their mind on a game like that. I've only met people that didn't grow up with it, that were influenced by people saying, oh, Zelda 2 is not a real Zelda game, or Super Mario 2 is not a real Mario game, even though at the time they were beloved games that critically acclaimed and universally loved. They started disliking it because of the AVGN and other such nitpicks. Well, like I said, I don't trust that. If that's the case, they probably didn't like it to begin with, or I don't know. They don't realize that the AVGN stuff is a shtick. It's an act. Like James is playing a character, and yes, there's truth to that. But like, you don't think James really doesn't like Zelda 2? Roger asks, any more books planned for the future? See above. I'm going to do a remake of the NES book. Any more Flea Market Madness episodes? Yeah, I got at least 2 more in me. That gets me to episode 50. After that, we'll see. Jack asks, after all these years, how different does it feel to play video games to you? Do you think the YouTube career or the certain books have made you not want to play them as much anymore? I don't think it's made me not want to play them as much, but now that it's a job as much as is recreation, in my spare time, I don't want to play them as much versus 15 years ago. So it's a lot tougher for me to pull out, fire up an emulator and just play a random NES game. I used to do that far more regularly than now. That's what makes it tougher. And even to play modern games, Ian, chides me sometimes or teases me for not playing more modern games, but it's like I'm steeped in games as a job. So when I'm not doing the job, whether it's working on the books, working on a video where I have to play a game or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or something else, I don't want to be constantly surrounded by it, if that makes sense. I need time to decompress from it. Lisa asks, any recent shenanigans with other YouTube gamers? I like hearing your stories like that. Any cons with Norm, Adrian, or James? Well, whenever I see James, he's always like super busy because he has a long line, but we talk for like 5-10 minutes. Sometimes we'll grab a drink together or dinner, but it's tougher, because like the conventions, like we don't do a lot of the same conventions anymore. He tends to stick more on the East Coast, but I'll see him at Too Many Games, for example, and we'll probably have a drink together and we'll talk and we'll catch up there. Norm is not doing as many conventions as he used to, and I'm not sure who Adrian refers to there. I'm not sure who that refers to there. So I'm trying to think about who that could be referring to. Tyler asks, when will the general game collection trend die out and make games cheap again? When we die out. When the people currently holding the stuff die out or retire and start selling it or get sick of it and start selling it and it all goes back and floods the market, that's when the games get cheap again. So it might be when you're retired. Like it might be 20 years from now or 10 years from now. Like you didn't see a lot of specific like game genre. Like for example, I think NES 5-10 years from now will be way cheaper. Like it's already getting cheaper. It got cheap. It was getting cheaper again until the pandemic gave it a shot in the arm. No pun intended. If it wasn't for the pandemic, I think by now you're looking at Atari prices for a lot of these NES games. I really do think that. So that got delayed. So yeah, it'll be like after the generation that grew up with it starts to think about retirement. That's when prices get cheaper, I think, on a lot of this stuff. Or closer to retirement. Like I'm closer to retire. I'm not going to retire next year, but I'm in my mid. So like, I think about that future sometimes. And finally, Scott asks, what are your top 5 retro cartoon theme songs? Oh God. In no particular order. Gummy Bears, Wheeled Warriors, Thundercats. I almost want to say G.I. Joe just because it's iconic, but it's not one of the better ones. The last one is Mask. Obviously, Mask is the all-time best one. I don't think it's close. Wheeled Warriors and Mask were the same composer and singers, so that makes sense why their quality is so good. Gem. Which version of Gem? The first version of Gem. Both are great, though. But the first version of Gem is excitement. Ooh, Gem. That's that one. Gem is truly amazing. That one. There you go. That's my 5 there. All right, great. Yeah, I watched Gem as a young boy. No shame in that. It was excellent. Great animation, great characters, great songs. Who didn't love Gem and the Holograms? Well, that's it for this Not So Common podcast. There'll be more. They're coming back more often this year, trust me. You can find me on Twitter at PatNESPunk or Pat Contry. Instagram and Twitch at Country Code. Instagram, I post like once every 2-3 weeks. And Twitch every Wednesday. Twitch.tv/Country Code. I do a really fun retro TV commercial stream. It's great. It's a great time. No one else is doing it like I'm doing it right now. And yeah, come out to see me this month at SoCal Retro Gaming Expo or Too Many Games in Pennsylvania. That's where I'll be at. All right, take care, everyone. And yeah, you can still pre-order a certain N64 guidebook, which is going to print very soon. Bye.